Our next guest is a PhD candidate in political science at Northwestern University, previously earned an MA from Georgetown University and a BA from American University. She's received writing awards from Northwestern and Georgetown and research support from the Social Science Research Council, the Mellon Foundation, the Council for American Overseas Research Centers, and the Buffett Institute. She's lived as far afield as Syria and Singapore, but Ohio, where she conducted the research for her book, As Ohio Goes, Life in the Post-Recession Nation, is the place she calls home. Please give a big Tuesday Funk welcome to Rana Khoury.
Thank you, Eden, and thank you to both of you for having me on tonight. I'm going to be reading from my book that just came out a few weeks ago, and this uses people's stories to talk about political economy. So it takes you through people who work in different industries, who come from all stripes of the political spectrum, and it tries to suggest that when we think about Ohio as a battleground state, as reds and blues, I'd rather you think about Ohio and the rest of the nation in the lens of growing income inequality and the divisions between top income earners and everybody else. And it's everybody else who's in this book. I'm from this little town, raised here all my life. I'm disabled right now, but I worked at a refractory plant for almost 38 years. I used to run the forklift and load and unload trucks. Stopped in 2006. My lungs. I got silicosis in my lungs. And I can't go very far. I have a hard time breathing. I was coming up on retirement, so I'm getting disability and Social Security. We've had a few rough times because of the high price of our medication, and we sent our son through college. But we have managed because we watch what we're doing and what we're spending. Some things we would like to do, we don't do anymore. We used to love and go play bingo. We had to cut it out because everything kind of went down. We had to be careful. My wife, she's disabled too. She was a nurse for 25 years. The refractory plant was a good place to work. They tried to do the best they can for their men. Sometimes it's hard for both situations, for the men and the company. But they have been kept open and kept everybody busy. We have a union, United Steelworkers. We had a pension plan. We worked and we had vacations. We had paid holidays. We got paid overtime for after 8 hours. A couple of times we had to give in too. We had to have two-tier for a while. I think it's both union and the company working together. It's been very good. After the close of our conversation, I was anxious to learn more about Gary's disability, silicosis. I learned that silicosis causes fluid buildup and scar tissue in the lungs. The disease commonly affects people who work where they may inhale tiny bits of silica. I discovered that silica is a core substance in refractory manufacturing. My mind darted back to Gary, and I recalled the close of our conversation. Me. Was your job ever physically risky? Gary. Every day. Me. But you were never affected? Never hurt? Gary. No. Gary came to mind when George, an auto worker in Toledo, declared that he would not stand for being put in danger at work. That resolve briefly lost him his job in 1977, his first year with Chrysler. Back then, George was working on Jeep Cherokee tailgates that hung by hooks above the workers. Each tailgate weighed about 70 pounds, and a jerk in the line could cause the hooks to break, sending those metal hunks tumbling down onto the men below. So George, with the audacity of a rookie, demanded that a safety cage be placed below the tailgates. Instead, management handed over a single hard hat, apparently to be shared among the 4 men on the floor. Some days later, a tailgate fell, landing 6 inches in front of George. Boom! The crash set George off. He shut down the line, nailed his union card to the wall, and declared he would retrieve the card and resume working only if and when the situation was addressed. The plant manager asked George if he was refusing to work. When George defiantly said yes, the management called in replacements. Ignited beyond containment, George picked up his hammer and threatened anyone who's going to come do this job is going to go through this hammer. Security guards swept in and escorted him out of the building. Witnesses to the episode, George's fellow workers initiated a wildcat strike. They informed management that if the safety issue was not addressed by the following week, they would not return to work. The strike succeeded. That weekend, the company installed 75 feet of safety cage, and the men returned to the line. 3 months later, George did too. He had taken his case to the National Labor Relations Board, which awarded him back pay and reinstatement. 3 decades after his rebellion, when he told me his tale, George was still an employee of Chrysler and a member of the United Auto Workers, UAW. By his lights, the two, work and labor activism, are inseparable. After graduating from Ohio State University, where he was a self-professed campus radical, George ran out of money, so he applied for the job at Chrysler, just as a way to pay the bills. On arriving at the plant on his first day, he found his new colleagues outside the main gate drinking beers. When he asked what was going on, they told him they had hit the bricks to protest a safety issue. George looked around him and thought, so all these guys are drinking beer, having a wildcat strike, and I says, this is the job for me. He knew at that moment that he would be active in the union, a commitment he kept. Among other organizing activities, George participated in a buyout committee that bid to make Chrysler an employee-owned corporation in 2006. The committee established a line of credit, but the effort failed because, George contends, they're not going to let these major automobile companies become employee-owned any more than they would let the slaves own a plantation in Georgia. Occasionally, George had union experiences that were not so good because of his tendency to make trouble. It's not hard to imagine why some people wanted to kick my ribs in at meetings. George is charismatic, outspoken, humorous, intelligent, and politicized. Those characteristics made him threatening to some. They also made him popular among most. George resembles his town, Toledo. His face is an inviting kind of handsome, topped with thick brown hair, surrendering slowly to white. The city wears its age in a similar fashion. Toledo is an old manufacturing town made beautiful by the wide Maumee River rolling through, flowing into the bay and out to Lake Erie. Just behind the trendy waterfront restaurants are the industrial plants. Just below George's fashionable fisherman's hat is the dirt beneath his fingernails. Donning a denim shirt with his worn jeans, George's person is literally blue collar. If Northwestern Ohio could wear a collar, it would be blue too. With Toledo at its heart, the region contains about 1/5 of Ohio's total manufacturing industry, the largest share in the state. Manufacturing predominates statewide too. 1 out of every $5 earned in private sector wages in Ohio is made in the manufacturing industry. Moreover, Ohio's industrial activity moves the nation. The state ranks second in the country in the manufacturing of primary and fabricated metals, and third in motor vehicle production. Industry around Ohio used to be even bigger. In 1970, nearly 1.5 million Ohioans worked in manufacturing. By 2012, fewer than 700,000 Ohioans worked in the sector. The decline is national, of course. Between 1970 and 2005, the United States lost 20% of manufacturing jobs. But in Toledo's Lucas County, manufacturing jobs declined by 54%. Given the auto industry's former predominance, George never could have fathomed its financial ruin. When I was in my 20s, if somebody had said General Motors is going to go bankrupt, I would have said, I want a 6-pack of what you're drinking, because that's crazy. Somebody get this man a beer. The financial troubles of the big three, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, hit hard and fast. In spring 2008, gas prices climbed to new highs, access to credit evaded companies and consumers alike, and auto sales dropped to new lows. At GM, for example, sales in 2008 were down 16% from those of the previous year. By 2009, they were down 53% from that low. Assembly lines slowed or shut down altogether, plants closed, and workers lost their jobs. The lucky ones lost only their benefits. The car companies had reached their nadir, but the real fear was whether the whole industry, perhaps the whole economy, might collapse. Should Chrysler or GM fail, their own job losses and those of other workers connected to the industry would cause national unemployment rates, already high, to soar. Ford CEO Alan Mulally reflected that a total bankruptcy at GM or Chrysler might well have turned the US recession into a depression. To prevent that outcome and save themselves, the big three went to Washington to request government loans, first from Bush's administration and then from Obama's. On condition that the companies undertook substantial restructuring, Washington paid out to Detroit. GM and Chrysler filed bankruptcy and accepted $64 billion in bailout funds, while Ford borrowed a more modest, but still critical, $6 billion. With billions at play in the structural integrity of the American economy in the balance, politicians and pundits eagerly offered their diagnoses and prognoses. The industry's decline was variously explained as the product of creative destruction, of excessive union activism, or of a lack of corporate innovation. The wisdom of the government's rescue plan was similarly touted and pouted. The issue reemerged as a central theme in the 2012 presidential campaign, by which time it was widely considered a success. Mitt Romney rued the day he penned the words, "Let Detroit go bankrupt," while Barack Obama boasted repeatedly that thanks to him, GM is alive and Bin Laden is dead. At a cost of $85 billion, the auto rescue saved upward of 1 million jobs. Furthermore, within a few years, the government had recovered most of the money it had dispersed in loans and, surely eager to extract itself from the business of selling cars, had sold off its stock in the auto companies. After the auto industry had hemorrhaged 40,000 jobs in just over a year, the bleeding stopped in Ohio. The government's rescue package arrived when employment in the state's manufacturing industry had hit a historic low. Over the following 3 years, tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs came back, each one a boon.